Well, welcome everybody. It's so lovely to see all of your beautiful faces here. And thank you for joining me today. We're going to be having just a really relaxed and fantastic conversation with Lama for the next hour about her journey as a podcaster, specifically being a CEO of PodHeroes. And then we'll also be moving on and talking about, what was it that you mentioned, Lama?
We're going to
Benchmarking.
talk about podcast benchmarking and what truly
That's it.
defines a successful podcast. Yeah.
Mm, so exciting. Brilliant. So, where shall we begin?
Well, how about I'll introduce myself. I think that would be good because
Absolutely.
everybody knows who I am. So I'm Lama Masri Osman. I have been actually in the podcasting industry for around 5 years now, so not much of a veteran, but good enough at least to understand the foundational element of it. Um, a bit. So I've also a host of the number one Arabic entrepreneurship podcast called Unicorn Arabic. And my basically introduction to podcasting was through Podio. So Podio is a hosting dashboard, it's a listening app, it's an ad tech platform as well. So I joined them when they were a team of 5, and we grew all the way till team of 45. And I was very happy to be with them through that journey and really meeting the industry, because back in 2020 there were only 1,500 Arabic podcasters, and people didn't really know what a podcast was. So it was beautiful to see the journey, educate, go through workshops and workshops. So we've learned a lot along the way, and that's why we've basically came up with PodHeroes, and
Brilliant.
basically an expert marketplace. And we'll go through it. We'll go through the presentation, but happy to.
Brilliant.
So, what would you like to continue? Would you like us to go straight to the presentation, Elizabeth, or do you have a few questions for me?
I think let's jump straight into the presentation, and then if we have any questions from from the people who have joined us today, then we can start to go through those questions, after we've maybe done the presentation. I'll keep an eye on the chat while we're doing it, and then as we go, we'll collect those questions, and then we can go from there.
Sounds great. Sounds great.
Fantastic, fantastic. So, there we go. Fantastic. Can you guys all see my screen? Brilliant.
You can.
There we go. Brilliant. Fantastic. Okay, so Lama, you just let me know when you want me to move on to the next slide, and then we go from there, okay?
Sounds good. So beautifully, I'd love to introduce, obviously, PodHeroes. So PodHeroes is actually, the idea came about by Vuk, the co-founder of Podster, with Borko, also co-founder of Podster Singapore, and Vladimir. I have a feeling they are on the call, and I know that they would love to say hello to everybody. If you guys want, feel free to unmute yourselves, guys, and say hello. But
Cool.
yeah, no worries, no worries.
No
So
worries.
if you just could go to, if you can go to the next slide. So I have. So let me first start with the mission statement. So yeah, so the story about PodHeroes really is basically, we realize through the entire podcasting community with Podster, a lot of their journey that they're going through while becoming podcasters, whether they're starting or they're experienced, they needed that guidance. They needed somebody, at least that one-on-one advice, and that was the real pain. So they may have outsourced a few experts, but they felt that usually an episode, to produce a single episode, it takes around 25 hours of background research, of going with the questions, of aligning with different guests, of it's really daunting. So with an expert, where our mission is really to basically take that drastically, at least to 6 hours, obviously with all these new and AI tools that are in the market. So that was really our mission: how to, you know, give impactful podcasts with this age of AI, but also really connect with these expert advices. You can go next, Elizabeth, please. So this is what happened. So we the problem was that there was a lot of pod fade, and I know that a lot of podcasters with us now feel like, all right, we have 10 episodes, and what's next? How do is my podcast successful? What do I do after that? And also, let's say podcasters that have gone maybe over to 100 experts, they've realized that, look, they've I've produced so many podcasts, right? And what's next for me? Or I have become an expert and I'd like to share that experience. So there wasn't a marketplace for me to put all these experts there. And that was a big reason why we founded it. And of course, there's no place to be reviewing the different experts. So there was no centralized platform. And so we said, all right, let's build it. Let's build it for the marketplace. And that's how we came about it. If you can go next, please, Elizabeth. And so that's when we came on the slide before, please, Elizabeth. No worries. And so that's when we came up with the world's first expert marketplace. So we started off actually with 15 experts from the region, because we are, you know, founders from the region. Our biggest expertise came from here. And actually and so June is dedicated for US experts. So we've been tagging along. And I know that a big shout out, I'd love to introduce Rob Greenlee. He's here. Elizabeth, if you can just ping his photo as well. I'd love to introduce him.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Yeah.
Likewise, guys, to kind of give you a bit of background of Rob Greenlee, he's a 20 years podcasting veteran. He's on the Podcast Hall of Fame. It was in 2017. He's the current chairperson of Podcast Hall of Fame as well. And he's been an experienced podcaster in different podcasting platforms like Podcast One, Microsoft Zoom Podcast, Spreaker, and Libsyn. It's so great to have you here, really. And his basically expert title is not live yet on the website, so I'm still teasing it. We go live with our US experts at the end of the month. So he's specific, it's like basically focused on podcast strategy and distribution experts. So really, we were so humbled to have you with us, Rob, really.
Thank you for having me. It's an exciting project here that you're working on. So I think there's a real need for it. Yeah.
Definitely. Thanks, Rob. I'll go back to Elizabeth. So Elizabeth, you can jump on the next slide. So yeah, so basically it's very straightforward. We try to make it as simple as possible, right? You explore the experts on the homepage. You tag along the different expertise that they have. You book an expert, select a time, and then you pay for their session. So pretty straightforward journey. Like I was mentioning, our founders. So Vak, if you guys know PodClub community, he has essentially founded it, and he's also building another company called PodX, which is a podcast booking studio. With Borko. Borko is also he's also one of our co-founders. He's ex country manager of Microsoft Singapore for 15 years. So brilliant tech guy. And Vladimir has built tech products out of Serbia. So lots of men. I'm glad to be the other woman in the room, but very excited to be building with them. And yeah, basically sharing all that knowledge about the podcasting industry. You can go next. Enough enough marketing of PodHeroes, but kind of to say the success is that, we built in Singapore. We started with just 15 curated experts already from the start. We were been featured. We have 100 experts on the waiting list in just 2 weeks, and we've already secured 20 bookings in just 2 weeks. So it's been really great tractions. We're very proud, and we thank you guys for entrusting in us. Really, it shows that the market really needs it. You can go next, please. So now let's talk about benchmarking, which is why you guys are all here. So thank you for giving me your 10 minutes from your time to kind of introduce PodHeroes. What I'd love to talk about, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, but what we've realized is that the top categories of the world is surprisingly, it's not surprisingly actually, it's society and culture. Even though we know that the podcasting industry truly started with true crime. I'm a very avid true crime, enthusiast. But yeah, it's society and culture. People want to know, each other's topics. They want to know what's happening. They want to talk about the nitty-gritty details, right? But also they use podcasting for learning. So it's education, it's business, it's that referring to a podcast episode when you're in a sitting, and that kind of gives you a leverage, right? But also even religion, right? So we know that back when I was with Podio, the highest so it depended, like how many downloads a certain content brought depend on the month. And when I noticed that, let's say during Ramadan, in the Middle East, you had an extremely live and high downloads for religion. So when you're setting, let's say you're benchmarking, you need to also understand how different categories behave during the year. So that's something to always keep in mind as well. You can go next, please. So for the Middle East, we're looking at also it tops at society and culture, and then you go with education, comedy, history, fiction, and business. Pretty straightforward. You can go next, please, Elizabeth. Now, around the world, you'd be surprised about these charts, but there are actually only 4.5 million podcasts worldwide. Whereas on YouTube is obviously much, much bigger when it comes to content being online. When it comes to Apple Podcasts, you're around 2.8 million. But surprisingly, look at the figure of the 4.5, less than half have more than 10 episodes. And then that 10 episodes, like the 1.2 million, that could have been podcast episodes that have been from, let's say, 2010. So are they active? Maybe they're not. So only like less than 500,000. So 444 is actually active, meaning they are literally weekly or monthly still pushing podcasts. So this is quite interesting stats when you're looking at how aggressively you want to go out to the market in the world. You're only competing with less than half. So giving podcasting space much bigger leverage to basically perform. You can go next, please, Elizabeth. So let's look at the Middle East listeners, since a lot of you have joined from the Middle East. When it comes to the listeners, we're looking at Egypt as the highest because, given their population. And then you're looking at the podcasting listeners in KSA at 5.1, and then the UAE about 2.3. So in general, the podcast listeners in the MENA region is around 15 million. Now, a nice chart. So feel free, guys, to take a screenshot of this. A nice like fact that we always mention in our, let's say, sponsorship pitch decks whenever we're approaching sponsors is that 91% trust podcasts much more than a traditional media. And a number you guys should always be tracking as well is, what's the basically completion rate? It's that 83% completion rate is how often people are finishing a podcast in the Middle East, which is very high. This is something that is probably not of the same. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rob. If you're looking at the
It's being
US
recorded.
based,
Okay, very good. It's being recorded. So let's watch it.
yeah, exactly. You can go next, please, Elizabeth. So this is something I know some of you maybe are joining from your from your phones. But if you're not joining on your phones, I've added some QR codes, and I'll explain what they're about. If you don't, there's a link directly there. So let's talk about how these applications behave. So when I was with Podio, obviously, we wanted to understand how things were aggregating, and a lot of people may not know this. So I'd like to kind of step away. When you build a website, I'll do this exercise with you, Rob, if you want to unmute yourself. So when you want to actually start a website, what's the first thing usually you go for?
Oh, as far as building a website, it'd be probably either WordPress or yeah, it's probably WordPress or Podpage is the other popular one now.
So first you would probably have to, let's say, buy a domain name, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
All right. So that domain name, for it to exist, right? And so let's say www.robgreenlee.com. I need to pay for hosting fees, right? So I'd go on GoDaddy, pay the hosting fees to make sure that that website exists. Now that, or let's call it the HTTPS, right? When
Yeah.
it's live, do I need to register it to, let's say, on Google Chrome or Internet Explorer? Or does
I
it
don't think
exist
so.
automatically?
Yeah, as long as
Exactly.
you have it set up with secure socket layers with HTTPS, it should go smoothly. Yeah.
Exactly. So when it comes to the podcasting industry, we have to think about the RSS link, kind of similar to the HTTPS link, right? And for that to exist on a cloud. And that RSS link, what I always like to mention it is that the way these apps work is they call podcatchers, right? So they catch that RSS link, and that's how they usually are appearing. So initially, when you're all going searching for a hosting dashboard, you're looking for all the different, let's say, who do they distribute to, right? And so you end up distributing. So let's say, so Spotify didn't used to be a podcatcher. It used to be just, it used to be just a a podcatcher. It didn't used to be also a hosting platform, right? So used to just to distribute, but they purchased Anchor, and now they're called Spotify for Creators, right? And so now that you can also host. Whereas Apple also exists as the podcatcher. So wherever you host your RSS, it starts catching it. Similar as Anghami, it catches. Podio, they do hosting and they catch the RSS link. So behind all these apps are curators. Right now, there's a team that looks at what are the trending podcasts, what's hot, what's different, let's say, category, what are people talking about, how many plays. There's a few, let's say, criterias for the curation team, but they have a CMS for all the different podcasts that exist in the world, and they see what's being discovered. And obviously, they have their editorial picks. A lot of them sometimes, let's say, maybe they know a podcaster or they know a team. So it goes through the cracks and then starts getting featured, right? And that's what I've added there. So for you guys that want more that visibility aspect, click on the link, reach out to the actual dedicated teams. There are forms that you could fill in, and let them know that you have a podcast and you have X number of episodes and what you're talking about. And they are more than happy to constantly feature new creators. This, your experience, Rob, when it comes to the US, do you feel that a lot of, let's say, listening apps, were they helpful with that kind of reach out when it comes to the forms?
Yeah, I think from a historical perspective, I think these bigger platforms are looking for something that's different or unique about your show, or a special guest or something like that, or a topic that they can highlight in the platform to drive their users to, that they think will get traction. Yeah, I did do the same thing back when I was working for Microsoft on the Zune platform, is that I'd have to pick different podcasts to feature in the interface, right? So there was a criteria that I had in my mind that, you know, what's new about that particular show that week that I could feature, right? So it's really a promotional vehicle for you. So if you can align what you're doing with, let's say, a hot topic or a hot guest, and get that really presented to those platforms, then they can actually have something that they can actually sink their teeth into, to say, well, let's do a platform promotion around that show for that week or something like that.
Amazing. Yeah, I think I know that a lot of platforms just generally love to see new content creators and really are
Right.
in that push for that newcomer.
Right.
So don't be intimidated by those big names. That's my biggest advice.
Yeah.
Reach out,
Right.
bombard them, you know.
Mhm.
And so this is, Rob, this is something I actually want to share with you, which is the podcast benchmarks, and obviously with everybody, because so internationally, what exists on these listening apps is that the international benchmarks for a podcast that is in English, whenever you're looking at it, like per episode, usually you track it that first 30 days when you launch that episode. So you want to always say, all right, when I first launched that episode, let me track how it's doing those first 30 days. And
Yeah.
from an English podcast, it's 100 and like, if you get 125 listens per episode, by the way, this is just for audio, you're on the top 50%. But
Right.
you know, in Arabic, it's, you know, it is also similar, but it, because at least for the Arabic audio perspective, there's not as big of an audience. So
Right.
hence why when you're looking at, let's say, the top 3%, you can see the English one, it's at 6,700 per episode, that first 30 days per month, versus the one in Arabic, which is just 3,000, right? So
Yeah.
the benchmark is still a bit low in Arabic, but it doesn't mean that when people have created Arabic podcasts, they're not going to do really well.
Right.
So if you can
Yeah.
go next, please, Elizabeth, that'd be great. So this is something for our video creators, so our vodcasters. So this is a benchmark. Actually, I'd love for you guys all to kind of feel free, take a screenshot. So globally, if they consider that, let's say the top 3% of podcasters globally, if they're getting 1 million views per episode, but they have 1 million subscribers per year, then that's it. That's like you've reached the top of the top, right? You've done really well. That's a great KPI to set. From an Arabic perspective, you don't need as much, right? You're looking at, let's say, around 100,000 views per episode, but also an expectation of around 100,000 subscribers per year. So the good thing from an, let's say, Middle Eastern perspective, these KPIs, keep them like track them, and know that it is not that difficult to scale, because at least in the Middle East is not that competitive. But obviously globally, if your podcast is in English, even if you're from here, these are, let's say, the big numbers that people are looking at. And when you're really starting to drive positive income when it comes to monetization. So it's really makes a difference when you have these many subscribers. And obviously, we'll go through the next tracking methods. You can go next, please, Elizabeth. So I've added here the top Arabic video podcasts, so on YouTube. And these are the metrics, obviously, that you guys can look for yourselves, and you could understand their successes as well. Obviously, Thamania their podcast, the Fanjan podcast, it got the number one, viewership in the history of podcasting. We know that at 142 million views. That's insane, right? They broke YouTube for that, and so that would be the number one, right? And then you go back down to the different Arabic networks. Some of them have 7.9 views, 3.8. We have Hikmat Wahbi's podcast, which was the last sessions PodClub meetup. They were at 1.6. And you could look at, and even the Ballast Theory, she's a Podster community member as well. She was on a PodClub expert call. And so she's at 2.9 million. And if you look at Hikmat Wahbi, right, he's 1.6 million. And then you look at Luca Alam, he's also joining us as a Pod Hero expert. He has 87,000 views, but both of them got streaming license deals, right? So for them, right, look at, the views maybe is not something that the networks looked at, but they looked at their subscriber base, right? And so Luca Alam, when he got to maybe, let's say, 100,000 subscribers, and a lot of it was his podcast was appearing on billboards around Dubai, right? On buildings, on Sheikh Zayed. And so people were like, all right, we've noticed him. He's gone even beyond just the podcast, but actually visually outside. So he grabbed our attention. And so he became someone that people wanted to see him on OSN, right? So this kind of, let's say, success for each one, is sets there. We have AB Talks at 1.5 million views. So they're good tracking numbers, but if we move now to the English ones, you get to see what type of numbers we're looking at. These are some of the top podcasters of US, right? And we're looking, obviously, the Joe Rogan Experience. We're at 3.7 views, and then the Diary of Serial, we get 16 million views, and then we've mentioned Rotten Tomato, 10 million, but then Trevor Noah, right, a celebrity that everybody knows on The Daily Show. He comes and he has a podcast with some of the biggest names, and he's getting only 8 million. So that podcast, actually, the What Now with Trevor Noah, with I think was Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook, and he only got 825,000 views on it. And so does that mean that's not successful? Of course it's successful, but it's not 10 million views. So it's interesting to see, the value of the weight maybe of people watching, but also who the host is. So basically, be hopeful. Know that there are things to be basically tracking, but it's interesting do you have any thoughts about these numbers, Rob? I mean, are they surprising to you at least?
Well, I think if you look at Trevor, I think it's an interesting example of a guy that came out of kind of a legacy media. You know, he was the host of the Daily Show and things like that, and those folks oftentimes don't do as well as those that are more grassroots that came up, and the cream rises to the top. Just because you're on mainstream media doesn't guarantee success in the online space. So I think that's the key takeaway here. If you look at the top people in here, they're organically came out of the digital side, and built followings based on their personality and their ability to connect with people. And because podcasting and even online video is a very personal medium, it's not like broadcast. So it's a completely different medium. So it's not surprising to me to see like a Jay Shetty and Stephen Bartlett with the Diary of a CEO reach this level of success because of the kind of personalities that they are and what they are trying to accomplish with their podcasts. They're trying to help people and to create conversations and to be a little controversial. And I think that's the other common thread in here is people pushing the envelope. So anyway, I don't want to take over the whole show. Go ahead.
No, no, of course. I think that's the beauty of podcasting, that
Yeah.
it is a channel that is controversial, right? It's
Yep.
unfiltered, it's uncensored. So it's that freedom that networks don't have to, hijack and control. So no,
Yeah.
it's good to see. If you can go next, please, Elizabeth. So please feel free to take a screenshot, guys, here, whether you're on your phones or on your laptops. So these are the most important metrics to track. All right. So when you're starting, whether you are, you're starting your podcast journey, or whether you are an experienced podcaster, and you have your monthly episodes, looking at everything. If you're just looking at audio, please make sure you're looking at, some people platforms, they call it listens, some people call it downloads. So just make sure to track that first 30 days of how many episodes, sorry, downloads you have, but also track it monthly, right? Is that growing? How's that growth aspect of my listener base? And then one of the most important things that advertisers would love to hear about is, what's your listen through rate? So always aim for that 80% completion, so that you go ahead and say, all right, guys, that's why I'm going to charge a very high CPM on my pre-roll, and my mid-roll. And obviously, if it's 80%, maybe much lower on your post-roll. Always also track your listen per episode. So how many people basically have that first 30 days, like I was mentioning, but also, of course, how many people have subscribed to your channel, slash how many follows you're getting. And then moving back down is on your videos. So what's your total views? What's your views per episode? And what's your average view duration? These are three metrics that you want to highlight, basically month to month. And then also highlight to your sponsors, basically, or not just yourself, basically monthly, how that's increasing, and then just per episode. So put your episode that's most views and highlight that. Make sure to highlight those guests as well. And then really important is your click through rate. So they fixate a lot on how successful and effective your thumbnails are on your titles. So try to always revisit that and see how you can improve along-wise. And then your engagement metrics when it comes to video: how many likes, dislikes, are people commenting, are people sharing? That's something kind of to give not just yourself, but also advertisers, that people are appreciating this type of content. And then the next one is, of course, your total subscription, your subscription growth, right? So take yourself, in 6 months, what's your subscription growth versus, and then you start tracking it, monthly. So try to keep those metrics in one place. You can dedicate a day a month if you want, so that you can know that this is what I'm going to use for metric tracking, and start uploading, onto a basically a slide deck, so that you can always track your numbers. Because a lot of times we depend on these platforms and then we forget to collect everything. So try to always just add a day for collecting of metrics, so that you can update your podcasting pitch deck. If you could go next, please, Elizabeth. So here is an example of two different podcasts that I had the pleasure to work on. One was a English branded podcast, a very famous, basically brand here in the Middle East, very strong within the payment gateways, and they did 6 podcast episodes. And they, even though it was in English, and they had very high figures, and they had agencies and a PR company and a advertising network, I'm telling you, the full team. They only they only got around 4,000 listens. Their total impressions was less than 500,000. But when they went on, we did another branded podcast. but for a government agency. And it was in Arabic and not heavily, like the team wasn't that big when it comes to the PR agency or, or the the advertising agency. It was pretty minimal, but still it was done in Arabic. And you could look at the total listens difference. So the listens automatically got to 31,000 listens. So within 6 episodes. And these are B2B podcasts, right? These are podcasts done from brands, not creators. So look at these kind of as examples of within, let's say, it's not even, we're looking at 9 months, right? So this is a 9 months real data snapshot of their, the corporate, basically how they did. So feel free again to take a strange shot for you guys to really understand how, the industry has performed as well. So don't feel so bad about it. Rob, if you were to look at this from an audio perspective, because these were audio podcasts. This is back in 2023 when people weren't really investing in video podcasts, especially corporates. Are these numbers? Do you feel they're surprising, or do you feel like they're within the industry benchmarks, at least in the US?
Yeah, I guess I'm a little bit surprised at the total listens number. It makes me wonder what the counting methodology is for the podcast at the bottom. So, to have that many listens, but have as a percentage, the unique impressions be kind of lower in comparison to that, and then the total impressions to be lower comparatively to the one above, right? Is a little bit surprising. So I would question kind of the counting methodology of the 31,000. What kind of a platform? What was that on? What was actually being counted there? So that's one of the confusing aspects of the market right now, is that there's downloads counting, there's impressions counting, there's streams being counted, there's plays being counted, and all these have a different kind of definitional requirement to count. The IAB metric standard in the U.S. says that any episode has to be listened to or enough data delivered to basically equate to 1 minute of listening before it can be counted as a listen. So, but what was the criteria for counting? It would be my question about this.
Yeah, and it goes down to the different aggregator of listens, right? And so if you're hosting in one platform and it's aggregating the different listens from the different platforms, and then maybe they're missing it. So it is unfortunately very confusing.
Yeah,
right?
It can be, right.
Yeah, it is. I couldn't agree more. But yeah, so these were literally the metrics that were aggregated into the hosting dashboard, which was Podio, and that's how they were aggregating from Spotify, from Apple, and that's how they were giving the data. So you'd have to see how best to basically convert these unique impressions to actual listens, right? I mean, you're looking at 105 unique impressions. How come there's only 4.4 listens? So, it's things to think about. Yeah, it is. It is. So we have another 15 minutes left, and I'm really happy we were on track, guys. I'm going to leave the floor open. If anybody has any questions for me or for Rob, or even for Elizabeth, please, the floor is yours, guys. I really, really appreciate all your time and for all of you guys to be here.
So we have a question here from Ivan. With billboards and promo, you get the attention. If you're good, they will stay and become a loyal audience. Oh, I thought that was a question. It was just a comment.
That's the answer to that.
Hello, Ivan.
Hello. Amazing session. Lama and Rob also.
Thanks. Thanks for that.
Yeah, thanks.
I love Rob's setup. Like it's like in the podcast, the sound is so perfect, and his voice is so radiophonic. Like so, it's really nice to listen to you both.
So we do have a
Rob
question
Ivan
here.
is
Oh,
also
sorry.
a fellow pod hero expert. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's
So we do
coming,
have a
right?
question
Yeah.
here from Salma. So Salma asks, how much is the importance of authenticity of the person in ratio to the success of the podcast? And this is a lovely question, Salma.
Salma, if you want to unmute yourself, if you can, just so I can further,
Sure.
like,
Can
thanks.
you hear me?
Yes, I can. I just wanted to ask, do you mean by
Okay.
authenticity of the host? So, like, let's say how natural he is when he's conducting the interview. Let's say if he has
Exactly.
great.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Um, well, look, the thing is, I'll answer this, and then if you want to jump in to add on, Robert,
Mhm.
I feel like in the world of podcasting, it is a niche, and success. What I've seen is that when you find something that you're truly passionate about, and people see and you can hear that passion through your mouth, like through what you're saying,
Yes.
people really resonate. People really resonate with that. And I'll give you an example with one podcast where we saw such success. She was focusing on the healthcare industry, and she was a doctor, specifically in cardiovascular diseases. And her listener base was not more than 100 listens per month, but she was able to charge from a sponsorship perspective because her niche of listeners were cardiovascular doctors. And so she
Yes.
was charging around $10,000 per episode, even though she's not reaching that high numbers, right, of
Yeah, I see.
listeners, but
Yes.
because it's such a niche that she's covering.
Mm.
So giving you kind of that example, for
Yes.
her, it was successful. I was able to reach 200 directly doctors. I built the community, right? I built that fan base.
Yes.
So before you start on success, I think just figure out your why you're starting your podcast,
Yes.
and then just put your KPIs for you. What does success mean to you, right? Does it mean that I've landed a consultancy gig after this? I built a brand name. I've built merchandise, right? So
Yes.
just figure out your why on that.
Thank you so much. It sums up everything. Thank you so much.
No
Thank
worries,
you.
of course.
So Tasneem has two questions. Tasneem, do you want to unmute yourself so you can ask your questions, my dear?
Hi. Thanks, Elizabeth. Okay, Lama. So I have two questions, as I said. The first one, how effective are audio podcasts? I have radio background, and being on radio, I just felt it was easier to sit behind the mic and people not seeing my face. I was able to speak more eloquently and more better. So I'm still holding on to that. And then the second thing is my niche is more inspirational, narrative, memoir, like getting into people's life stories and, tackling on things that I feel people would want to hear, but they don't ordinarily talk about it because they don't have a platform to talk about it. Is this a productive angle for listenership, or do I need to change things a bit? Thank you.
Rob, the floor is yours. I'm pretty sure
Okay.
you would love to answer this.
Well, yeah, I think it's you need to start where you feel most comfortable, would be my recommendation. I don't think, even though I'm pro video, I think it's part of the mix, and it depends on what your passions are and what you want to do. If you feel like your content is stronger as an audio only, I don't think there's any reason to not follow that path. And then maybe just consider video over a period of time as you experiment and see maybe there's a way that I can potentially build my personal brand and reach a little bit more audience by doing some video at some point. But the key thing is that to keep that strong relationship with your audience, you need to feel good about what you're doing. And I think that's the key thing. And you've already expressed what your passion is and what's right for you. And so I would stick with that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would recommend just one more thing is that you could, we're so lucky now with the power of AI, you can create these faceless videos, right? So they're not you, they're your avatars, and right? So create an avatar, throw the content, and let it talk for you. You don't
I
even
like
need
that.
media training. You don't need media training anymore. AI can do it.
I like that. I must look into that. Thank you, Lama. Thanks.
Of course, of course.
Wonderful. So we have another question from Nadine. Nadine, do you want to unmute yourself so you can ask your question? Or would you
Yes,
like it read
thank you,
out?
Elizabeth.
Beautiful.
Thank you guys for this insightful session, first of all. Second of all, I've been working for a few years now with, podcasting, different types of podcasts, especially vodcasts. And the beginning of my career, I dabbled with audio, and I was very, very passionate about audio. But I always get a sense, especially the past 3-4 years, that the industry is in that 1% of, chats with industry experts or chats with celebrities. And I just feel like this is going to saturate very, very quickly as we go. So how can we go back to the original basic format that is audio without having, or what are some methods where we can push for the audio storytelling and maybe revive it and give it like this resuscitation without having to go all the way to video, or like showing my guests or showing my people just casually sitting in front of two mics. So if you have any tips for that, or if you have any insights.
Rob, would you like to talk?
Yeah. I think it's a very similar question to the prior question that we had. I think it really gets back to what you want to do as a creator and what you think is appropriate for the audience that you're trying to reach. I think that's far more important than worrying about the video side. You're a content creator. You're creating content in a way that needs to be authentic and real to who you are. And if that includes video, then I think that's great. But you have to feel comfortable with it. And you're expressing to us here that you are not entirely comfortable with that. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. Audio is still strong in the market. It's still being consumed, but you're concerned about celebrities and big names. That's at the top 0.5% of podcasts. Most of the consumption and most of the podcasts out there are not celebrities. And just because you're a celebrity doesn't mean that it's going to be a success, even for them. So it's, you're playing in an area that you need to stay focused on what you want to do and what you think your audience wants and needs and what you can bring to them to bring value. And that's the key thing to look at. If it includes video, great. If it doesn't, that's great as well.
Right.
I think I'll just add to that is knowing that podcasting, the listener actively selects play to listen to your episode. It's not so, which it's really, like you said, it's really intentional for me to listen to you. So audio will always be there. Majority of people are not watching you, they're listening to you. So even if you want to push your RSS on YouTube just as an audio format, right, or but have it exists on YouTube, right, which you could do that with their RSS, but push it so that you want it to be discovered. You want to be everywhere. Your podcast should exist on all the listening apps, because we don't know where that listener, that community that you're building will be on. So you're comfortable with audio, stay on audio. You don't need to kind of follow that trend just because everyone's doing it, especially if you're focusing on a niche, right? If there's what's the content you're doing?
Narrative storytelling. So stories
Yeah,
of,
that's audio.
yeah.
That's audio. That's
Yeah.
audio. 100%. I love that, and it does really well. And I'm sure if, follow the trends like we're talking about. So what I said in the beginning was, notice that there are certain hypes of when people are listening to that type of content. Is it late at night? They can't sleep. Maybe look at tagging with, let's say networks that have like sleeping advice, for these kind of things, or entertainment for maybe kids, depending on the categories you go. But
Yeah.
try to kind of say, widen your where should my podcast exist and under which specific platform so people can find me.
Right. Thank you, guys.
Of
All right,
course.
thanks.
Of course.
So we've got about 4 more minutes left before our hour is over. So if anybody else has any questions that they would like to put forward, then I would suggest maybe unmute yourself and you can put forward that question. I see we do have 3 questions in our chat. So I think it's Sadna and then Amir. And we've got another question as well. Lovely. So yeah, we have about sort of 3 or 4 minutes left. So maybe unmute yourself and then pop your question forward if you've got it. And then yeah, that'll be that.
Hello,
Yeah,
everybody. Is it fine? Hello.
please go
Hello.
ahead.
Hi.
Yeah, I have a question. This is Sadhna. Actually, I have written my question in the chat. So, see, people are saying that the podcast should have only celebrities in it. Is it required to only have celebrities? What about those people who really want to share their stories, but nobody is asking them? And they have the true life stories. Celebrities might, they can add on the stuff which is actually not required. But if we are sharing the story of the layman, means the regular person, and can you please answer my this question?
Sure. You don't need to be a celebrity to be a good podcaster. I got #1 entrepreneurship podcast. I'm no close to a celebrity. I'm just an average
No,
person.
because this was the
right,
suggestion I got from my people.
Yeah. Look, again, it's what defines success to you. If for you, your success metric is to get a celebrity, then that's what success means to you, right? So don't, what I shared on the presentation are like typical numbers that you would need to get to define a success, right? And this is generally the average, let's say, listens and number basis, but it differs for the different industries. And what I know Rob is missing from the industry, it's something I've been trying to work on with Podio, is how do we create something that is so visible for the whole world to see? How many like let's say, how many expect benchmarks should society and culture get, right? How many listens does religion need to get? Like, what's the true numbers per category? Because that changes, that will help you set the actual number.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to kind of just make a comment on this too. I think the topics and the value is more important than the celebrity. The celebrity, if it's not put in the context of some sort of a value message to the audience, the audience isn't going to care. So it's all about the message. And if you can accomplish that unique and interesting message with a expert that isn't a celebrity, that typically I've heard from many podcasters that have told me that it's not the big names that always draw the most audience. It's the topic, and it's how relevant that topic is and how helpful that topic is to the audience is what really drives the metrics. So focusing on celebrities is not necessarily the path to assured success. Now, if that celebrity brings a unique message or has something interesting to talk about that you can highlight, then I think that is an important thing. So just have to keep in mind what the audience wants and what the audience is going to get from the content as really your driver of your choices here.
Absolutely.
I think there was just one more question we might have missed in the chat, which was, what are the important aspects to focus on when it comes to monetization?
Yeah.
Again, there is monetizing programmatically, and then there's monetizing from a sponsorship led, right? Having a brand come in and you say, hi guys, this podcast is sponsored by X. So what you need to always maintain is there's a few things that brands really look at. How much value will you bring? Do you have a community, right? And is it 1,000 people community? Is it 500? How heavy is it, and what's the knowledge? So they will assess on the content type. They will assess how good your interview is as well. They will look at the true, like, who's the person behind this brand, right? Is he trustworthy? And these are the type of things you need to be as authentic as possible when it comes to these. It's just not everybody can start a podcast. They really need to know how, not just to speak, but especially if it's an interview, how to listen. So these are some things that you really need to be the best version of yourself to basically succeed at podcasting. And these are the, let's say, the monetization, let's say, brands, what they look at. And beyond that is join a podcast ad network, right? If you're on Podio, you join their monetization realm. That's Podcast Media as well. They're on board. And then if you're in the US and your podcast is in English, monetize with the big giants there. Rob can share some more insights there.
Yeah, I think that you have some options. And this is a common question that I'm hearing in the industry right now around how to set yourself up for monetization from day one, really, when you start a podcast. There's a couple of ways of proceeding down this path. And one is to get on a hosting platform that supports what they call programmatic advertising, which basically you set insertion points in your content and you get on a platform that's automatically inserts sponsor ads in your show automatically. You don't have to do anything. It typically doesn't pay that well. So having a dual strategy of starting out like that is really the only path to start out monetization from day one. And then the other path is to focus on kind of a sponsorship model, which means that take whatever genre of show that you have, and is there a natural fit with a particular brand or a combination of brands out there, and approach those brands and see if you can get a direct kind of sponsorship or relationship to do like host reads baked into the content itself to endorse those brands if it aligns well with the genre and topic of your podcast. And so some brands may be willing to sponsor you from day one if there's a very good alignment, but you have to put together like a PDF deck that you can present to them that this is the topic, this is the focus, this is what we're offering. But you got to really keep your dollar amount for sponsorship kind of low at the beginning. So it's not a big hill to climb to actually get that deal. But that has to be evaluated based on what you expect your launch audience to actually be and the reach. It's been around podcasting for a long time, this approach. So it isn't something new, but the programmatic side is a way that you can get started with, a few ads in your show, but you're not going to make much money at the beginning until you grow an audience. So it's a complicated subject, but everybody wants to monetize from day one because we've been trained to think about, side hustles and ways to make money. And if we can combine this, this hobby passion that we have around creating podcasts with a way to make money, that's the sweet spot that everybody wants.
One thing I'd like to add that Moin Jabir gave an advice on. So he's a famous podcaster here in the Middle East. He said, I reached out to a friend of mine who has a company that matches my podcast, and I let him sponsor my my podcast basically for free, and so that teased the different experts. Sorry guys, I'm calling from Lebanon, and of course the electricity got cut.
Oh
I'll be
no.
back online. Yeah. But yeah, so that is a like a tip that people do when it comes to, let's say, starting off in podcasting.
Yeah. Yeah, that can work too. I agree.
So I know we're going a bit over time, but Mohammed is asking if we have time for, do you guys have time for another question?
I have one question
Sure.
to ask as well, please.
Yes, of course.
Thank you very much, Lama and Rob. I mean, great session. A lot of information to not take much time. So I'm starting my podcast, and I wanted to ask. I'll have like two types of content in the same podcast: one solo and one with guests. Did you see any example that a podcast has mixed both, or should it be like different seasons, or I can have like a play with this?
Yeah, I think it's a really great model, and I see shows that have a solo episode and then a guest episode, like creating 2 episodes a week, is actually probably the best model to grow the fastest. It takes a lot of dedication to do that. That's not an easy path, but podcasting today is not an easy medium. But I have seen shows do well with that exact model. And so, I think you're on the right track with that.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mohammed. Any other questions? How are we good? Are we good to wrap up, Elizabeth?
Let's see. So Delnaz is raising her hand. I don't know if you guys have time for more questions, but if you guys would like to answer a few more questions, I've got time.
Okay.
I'm happy to. All up to Rob. If you're busy,
Yeah.
please.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
It's okay. Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Thank
Yeah,
you very
sure.
much.
Amazing.
Thank you very much for this beautiful session. It was very insightful for me. So podcast is something extremely very new to me. And I would like to know, when you're a new player in podcasting, specifically in terms of your audience, what are the important parameters one needs to keep in mind?
Yeah, that's a hard one. It's going to be different for every podcast. It's going to be different for you. It's going to be different for your topics, your expertise. And it's not always easy to start a podcast and have a clear understanding of who the audience will be for that podcast. So you can have that audience member, that persona, that person that you're speaking to, you can keep that in your mind. So you know that what you're talking about is going to be relevant to that person in that particular specific kind of demographic area of a person's life. So what you're talking about is relevant to them. But that's what you have to strive for, is over a period of time, you will learn more about your audience. Get them to interact with you. Podcasters will do, let's say, a survey monkey survey of their audience very early in their path, and get feedback from people that aren't necessarily your family. But it's not easy to do that. So you have to really get a hold of people, reach out to people, answer people's comments, trying to inspire people to give you feedback and to give you honest feedback, because that's what you want to hear. I mean, you don't want to hear feedback that is just trying to please you, right? What you want to hear is feedback about what people are honestly think about what you're doing and how they think you might improve. But also keep in mind, don't take, just because you get one person's feedback on your podcast, to change everything to what they said. It needs to be a cross section. So you need to have multiple people giving you feedback, and then you sift through that to determine what's relevant for you and what feels good to you about what you should do with your show. Because at the end of the day, this is your show. So, you know, you're the master of the ship. All you're looking for is the other sailors to give you feedback about how you're mastering that ship.
I think one thing I'd like to add on, I always mention it to our podcasters, is what is, what's the purpose of this podcast? Is it so you have to basically, do you have a clear CTA for this podcast? A clear call to action? Do you want people to go and subscribe to, let's say, your consultancy advice? I think this is Desma, right? You have your HR podcast. Is this the same Desma?
No, no.
The B2B one? No, it's another Desma. Okay. Basically figuring out what you want to drive, right? Are you building this podcast to build your personal brand? Are you building this podcast to become an industry expert for something you'll end up giving consultancy for? So try to figure out how, beyond sponsoring, what can I generate money out of this, right? Why am I building this? What's going to make me stand out? And if it's just like, so I did season 1 of my podcast. I did not want to monetize. I wanted to invest as a personal brand to be, let's say, an expert in entrepreneurship in Arabic for the region, and that was my investment, right? But season 2, I said, I don't even want to record without a sponsor. So I that's how I measured my success. So once the sponsor comes, that's it. That's how I go ahead. I know, Angela, you have a question as well.
Thank you very much, Rob, Lama, Elizabeth. That was very helpful for me. Thanks a lot.
Of course, I'm glad. Angela, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yes.
I know you
Yes,
have your
yes.
hand raised.
I was sorry. I'm having actually I had a podcast in Germany, and I wanted to make a podcast here in English, and therefore my strategy is just to get a little bit more awareness in the English market, and for that I wish to be more as invited as a guest, but it's like for me to search like the needle in the in the hayhaven, and to find podcasts that would take me as a guest first of all, and then suit also my audience. Do you have actually some kind of strategy, or I would like to I appreciate some sharings that you have, how you did it maybe. I mean, you guys know each other maybe already for long. I'm not. I only know the podcast that I myself listen to. I applied there, and even I am been taken on, but for a huge amount of money, like $10,000. So I don't want to do that. And I think it's much more worth to be in podcasts spread it in over a wider audience in different podcasts than to be one very expensive one. So
Yeah, I think that the easiest answer to that is just find the podcasts that align with the topics that you align with, and you can reach out to them and just be cordial and tell them that you're a passionate, actual authentically a fan of the show, and you have this kind of knowledge set that you would think is appropriate to be featured on that podcast. Now there's guest matching platforms that exist out there. One's called Podmatch, that you can sign up for and put your profile on there and put your information in there. And there's a variety of kind of guest matching services and platforms out there, but most of them charge for that to some degree, but some are pretty low cost, and there's a few that are free out there as well. So I would look for those as well. But to really be focused on all of the creators that you think align with your message, and become an expert in those shows as well. And then that'll put you in a position where you can intelligently and authentically reach out to them and propose to them that you be a guest on their shows.
Okay, so these platforms are what you call it?
Podmatch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Podmatch. But there's also one I know that it's for free.
Yeah.
He's one of our executive committee members, Elizabeth, right? What was it called? His website?
So his website's
He
called
built
Mic Match.
Mic Match.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
he's just launched that one,
So-
so you can have a look at that one as well.
Good, thank you. That's already made my day.
That's
Yeah,
great.
put it in, because I mean we got, I mean, I know that PodClub community has a channel dedicated for even podcast guests
Yes.
matching. So, talk there, put in your request, and bombard your PodClub community. That's what we're here for. We're here to support each other. Willkommen, Angela.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Thank you for
Cheers.
having me.
Of course.
So
Elizabeth?
yeah,
Anybody
so I think
else?
that I don't think there are any other questions left now. And yeah, we've already gone like 60 minutes over the time, which is amazing that everybody's been so engaged. And thank you all for your questions and for being a part of this beautiful virtual event. And thank you so much, Lama and Rob, for being here, for giving us your wisdom and your insights. Really appreciate it. And yeah, I personally also took away and learned something new from this experience. So we'd also last closing note here, we'd love your feedback. So we've got a little QR code here on the screen. If you want to, just grab your phone and pull out your camera and just fill in the short little form that we've put together. We'd love your feedback. We always appreciate, we always want to know how we can make our virtual events and our events in general even better and more, more amazing for you guys. So yeah, thank you guys so much. This was fantastic, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening further.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for your time, and thank you, Rob, for joining us. Really, I really appreciate your time, and really everybody for making the time for this. And happy podcasting, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Keep
Bye.
well, everyone. Bye.